Thanks. Look, just to give you an update of where we are and what we're up to. Back the other way. There we go. Some of the things that we've been looking at, and has been a major part of our work for the past year and longer than that, actually 2 years, has obviously been the EMAPS project, and I won't go into too much detail because Maurice will speak about that. But we've engaged on a massive project that includes the industry partners, that's Master Electricians, the ETU and also NECA, on this competency-based progression model and see how it works. And that's going to, as been said before, that will feed into a whole bunch of information so that industry can move forward or stay as it is in the next few years. So that MATS project is really important for our industry, particularly based on the changing landscape on competency-based progression. That it'll inform those partners of where they should go from there, and also the RTOs, how it will pan out. We're still engaged with the Commonwealth Government till the end of June 2015 and further, where our contract on training package reviews will finish. We're to have our final migration policy of new assessment criteria, etc., to the federal government by December 2015. So that contract stays in place. So if you can imagine the process of what happens with training packages, the current training packages, no matter what happens into the future, will still be in existence for the next 3 to 4 years because of teach out, etc., etc. So it's important we get it right. It's important we incorporate the things that are needed by industry in this review, and it's taking up. It's our core business really at the end of the day, and it's a core business for the RTOs and also for industry. We also make sure, and if you heard Craig's presentation about, we see the regulator as a stakeholder in the industry. You see the industry definition. We include regulators. Because at the end of the day, in our industry, with permits and regulation and licences, no permit, no licence, no working. So our qualifications have to incorporate those regulator requirements. We do it a different way to other ISCs. We ask what the regulator wants first before we build the qualification. So they have a huge input. I couldn't see the point of having a qualification that existed that had to try and match the regulator after you build it. We actually incorporate the regulation in first so that we can at least satisfy the ability for people to work straight away after the qualification acceptance. We're also international. We have had some liaison with Trades Recognition Australia and also with the federal government on the trade and the cooperation criteria with the Indian government. If you saw Mr. Abbott over in India talking about mining and other agreements, I was actually over there signing an MOU with the Indian government on internationalisation of our units. So that vet cooperation, we actually had an input into how to set up an ISC network in India, which sort of seems a little bit silly, given some of the things the Minister said. We took our experience to India to show them how to set up our system, and they've done that. Our system is seen to be the envy of the world at the point, so India's gathered all the information around the world and said, we like that system of ISCs and units of competence, etc. We'll mirror it in India, and we helped them over the last 2 years to put that in place, not just our ISC but other ISCs. So that's been put into India. They've actually gone ahead and done it, and they have a central ISC looking after our industries, particularly telecommunications and partly electrical, but they have 30 centres of excellence around India, and they're to train 5 million people in 2 years. So they're full on, based on our system. Just on supports, the other things, we've also been approached by Austrade to do some work in other countries, particularly on the internationalisation of our units. not the Australian content, not the regulation. They really like the technical nature of our units, and particularly the knowledge and skills that gives people the understanding of what they're doing. So it's not just monkey see, monkey do. That's been interesting for us, and I think there's an opportunity for the Industry Skills Council to go ahead with that. We've been talking about support resource provision, which is that energy space thing you saw launched this morning. At the end of the day, the ISC, as I keep saying, is an ASIC registered company, independent of government, not for profit, owned by the industry. So for us is, as an independent body, do we make sure that we survive in all types of climates, or do we wait for a politician's stroke of the pen to get rid of us, or not, or tick us, or do we become the industry's voice or the industry servant for lots of different provisions and become independent of all those discretions or decisions made by government? My board said, let's be an independent company, let's be industry owned, not for profit, get on with it and become a service provider to the government rather than a slave to the government. So all those issues that come up, we'd seen that coming probably a couple of years ago, where there's rumours going around and policies and all the rest of it, and we've moved to having an alternate income rather than just government money. And that's something that's we've managed to achieve, I think, and I think we'll be fine until governments come and go and different policies arrive, and we'll be around for that duration. Just on the contract for the NWDF, we were one of the most successful ISCs on developing workforce development in our industry, and I'll just give you a bit of an idea. The idea was that the government would provide a percentage, depending on the size of your company, to train, upskill your existing workers. And part of the deal was that the employer would make a contribution. We've trained at this point in time over this NWDF project 3,793 students, or existing workers, to upskill. The total employers, we've had 1,057 employers involved in this program. And the key to it for me, particularly because my background was small business, there's 980 small businesses that have had trained, there's workforce trained that wouldn't have had the opportunity. And 980 small businesses, operatives trained up to higher skills. Some of the total RTOs of 50 were involved. The most popular training with Cert 4, so a smart trade, higher level skill sets. A lot of it were in photovoltaics. A lot of it was in telco, but photovoltaics seemed to be the go, so you could see where the market's moving. And in the sectors, it's interesting, 88% in electro, ESI, TDR, and generation, surprisingly, Richard, 75 students in the generation plants actually went to national qualifications based on being subsidised for that training. So that was something that you highlighted and something we need to work on. We could increase that, would be great. But it was interesting, they did engage in that program. And also gas 1%, and we've got to get the gas blokes up and going. So we've got any strategies to put that in place. But that was really success for our ISC. We've been audited by the government, and we've come out fairly squeaky clean on everything we've done. Some of the issues some of the other ISCs have about accounting for money and employer contribution, we solved that before we started, and we've what we call best case or best practice. That's really what we've been up to. There's a myriad of other things that keep me on a plane, keep our staff busy, but at the end of the day, they're really the basic things that we've been up to. And part of our core business, obviously, is training package updates, training package development, sorry, and John Shearston will talk to you about that as best he can. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, as you can see, training package is still there. We'll be here for a long time in the future. And we have been fairly busy with the NWSC, who's no longer, putting out a new template. We've been working on the template. I know some of our consultants are, bear with us. We had a few changes. It's called continuous improvement, even at the template side, the process of consultation. So while we did take a while to get ramped up and get the consultants actually building the new units in the 4 sectors, and some of the consultants here today that we've been using. So basically really our work being the unit migration and trying to slow down any change that were unnecessary, but really getting ready to move the units in that new template. We've been doing the IC upgrades, and that's a continuous, that's not a real impact on the RTOs or the industry. They just getting some of the mistakes, some of the units put in there. As an ISC, we're allowed to put elective units in any of the qualifications to meet the industry demands, and we can build skill sets under ISC, and that's been a demand area also. I know with Michelle in the workforce development, often there's a request comes in for workforce development previously to have a skill set, and we can put that under ISC change, which is quite flexible. We have been developing new units, and it's interesting, to listen to the speakers here about the new units coming out in the PV with battery storage, and we've got draft units already going through the process, ready to go up for endorsement very soon on grid connect with battery storage, design unit and install unit. And there's people actually installing those type of installations today out there in the community. So we are working on there. I know in the generation sector we've been working on the remote area supply qualifications and units to meet the remote area needs, and that's probably be the first units up in the new format and the new qualification. Currently, if you look at the status of the training packages on TGA, we've taken a fairly conservative reaction here. We didn't want to introduce too many changes. We've been fairly busy with IC changes, but we don't want to change the package unnecessary because it does have a major impact on the training providers and the industry just to change the codes and rescope and that and rebuild your resources. The electro-technology package is still the UEE 11 package. That's a 1.4 version. The 0.4 means it's been 4 ISC changes in that package to date. And that means we've just been tidying up, putting skill set selective units. The UET, the transmission, distribution, rail sector package, we're up to version 2 there. The generation package, we're up to version 2.1. And the gas package, we've gone to a version 2. Hopefully it won't be any more version changes till we get the whole lot in, and it will go to a new package identifier. And that means that in the future, these old packages will disappear with the year code on them, and they'll become a UEE package, UET package, UEP and a UEG. And that means you don't have to change anything unless you use a qualification. The year code will be on the qualification only. There won't be any new packages as such in the future. And these old packages will disappear as in the year version that was endorsed. So that's probably one of the things that the NWSC did do well, was to get rid of that year. So we can thank them for that, and they don't no longer exist. Just the scope of the unit migration is quite massive, really. Most people probably would have seen the new template. It's up to version 5, I think, at the moment. So the consultant's actually asking what version up to, but that really is a better template that really defines the assessment requirements that you're required to assess against, and that's in terms of the performance evidence, which is what the person does in the workplace, and the knowledge that you need to do that work. We have fine-tuned it a fair bit over the period, and to date, we basically, as you can see with the percentage, in electro-technology, we've got 612 units in that package. It's quite a large package covering about 7 areas: electrical, electronic communications, instrumentation control, refrigeration, air conditioning, hazardous areas, rail signalling and renewable energy. So it covers a wide area. At present, we've got 20% of the units in the pipeline that have been written going through various stages of QA consultation. We had to put a hold on some of the units, mainly because the regulators have formed a committee reviewing the 66, and I believe that it's going to be something like the 66, but probably won't be 66 EPCs, essential performance capabilities, but we'll have to hold the electrical competencies till we get the outcome of that from the regulators. I did have a slide there I forgot to put in there. I had the regulator handing down the new EPCs to Bob, like the on a stone tablet, but I forgot to put that in there. I'm still waiting on Anthony to do the IT side for me. So that's been put on hold, just waiting, and I've been told that November will be the decision where the new EPCs will be signed off and handed over to incorporate into the new template. In the other areas, the electronic and communication, TAC have been working very busily in migrating units. The refrigeration air conditioning has also been working. We just started the instrumentation and control area. Hazardous, we've really tied up with the M66 committee on standards, because we import these standards from the Australian standards. Rail Singling have been busy revising their units, and so that's been 20% of the units, as I said, in the pipeline. The transmission distribution, that's going very well at the certificate-free level. We've had a very active tax in those areas, because a lot of the work comes from the consultants, and I'll show you the process, and we work it out in the technical advisory committees. And we've got 21% of the units in the pipeline at the moment in various stages of QA and in the consultation. And that's mainly at the certificate-free line worker distribution at this stage. We have got cable joining, the remote area certificate-free qual, and we are working in the design area and substations at this stage, and systems operations. The generation, we mainly work in the certificate-free operations qual at the moment, and we've got some units there, and we achieved 11% of those units being in the migration area. The gas industry, there's 109 units in that, and we've got 9% of the units migrated in the process. So it looks a bit slow at the moment, but next year will be the big ramp up. Now we've got the processes in place and the templates finally sorted out. We'll get the contractors, consultants actually busy writing the unit and getting the consultation. And just to go through what we actually do, we engage consultants, which are subject matter experts, we contract them to write the units in our template. They actually send them in there to us. We do just a desktop QA on making sure all the fields in the templates are filled in. Then they go up on our industry forum page, and if you're not aware of these industry forums, go to our website, you can self-register, and that's where we put these units up for consultation. They actually appear, and as you can see, the days, we take 7 days to do a QA, but they're up there on a 28-day period for consultation. We're asking the people to hop on the industry forum and put your comments on there, because at the end of the day, the comments can be seen by everyone, but at least you can see what people comment, and that's our feedback. A lot of this is electronic. That's working in some of the technical advisory committees very well. After the 28 days, by the way, we give you a 7-day alert. If it's nothing's there at the 21-day period, this alert goes out to the forum that's something you need to look at it. After that, we take those comments and put it into this virtually following Australian standards policy. We put it into a feedback form, all the comments, and we respond to them. And we rebuild the draft unit, goes into an ISC recommended unit. It goes back to the consultant, and we take those relevant comments and we incorporate in the ISC recommended unit. Then we post that up to the forum again, and the technical advisory committee members, and there's open membership there, vote on it. If it's a lot of issues involved, we'll take it back to the technical advisory committee and sort it out in a face-to-face fashion. If everyone's happy with the unit, we'll pass it on to the NTAG, which we're meeting tomorrow. And that's the next one. So the ISC unit goes to the peak body, the National Training and Advisory Group, and they'll okay it. And we normally would do that electronically, and they've got 7 days, and then it goes to our sector council. which is a representative of our board, and 2 of our directors are forming the sector council for the relevant area. Once it goes through that process, we hand it to the training package unit in Canberra, and they put it into the system, which is a government system, and will appear on TGA. It goes in through the endorsement process. A little bit step by step, but it gives everyone opportunity to have their say, have their feedback on there. They can come to the technical advisory committees. A lot of our technical advisory committees we use in GoToMeeting in terms of videoing in so people can join remotely. We're using that more and more. The next technical advisory committees are in March, April next year. They're on our calendar already. We've set the dates. So, go to our website and look at when they are on and get involved with it, because that's where our feedbacks are. And that's where you know what's going on. So by 2015, I think it's going to be a pretty tough deadline, but that's what the old NWSC given us. We should have all the units migrated. A lot of the technical advisory committees are finding that a lot of the units we currently have in some of our disciplines won't be migrated. We're going through and doing a whole heap of analysis on the system, what units are being used. A lot of the elective units are not being used. We'll put them on the shelf. Unless there's demand from the industry, we won't migrate those units at this stage. But quite often some of the units are being pulling apart, or a couple are going together, so we're actually changing there. And it's the drive from the technical advisory committees and the industry, what's going in there.
I'd like to thank all the participants who was involved in the project. We've been filming I think it was 4 apprentices over the last about 1.5 years, and that was the last sort of episode. We pulled them all together, and I'd like to thank all the apprentices, the RTOs, the mentor advisors, and who were involved in that film. And I think it was a good film of gives you an overview of what the apprentices are doing in the field. Probably before I go through the last 2.5 years of the project, probably want to go back to why we started this project in the first place, and it really goes back to probably the discussion we had yesterday morning about competency-based progression. And the key aspects we were looking at was to improve apprenticeship completion rates and also in retention rates in the electrical industry. And I don't want to go into all the data. We've talked about that many times in the past, but we do need to go back to why we started this project. The other one was to facilitate competency-based progression, and a lot of discussion was held around that yesterday, and we have been doing a lot of work in the field with the RTOs and over the last 2 odd years, and also to assure that there's a quality on and off the job training delivery mechanism put in place. And that's also one of the cornerstones of what we undertook. Probably for people who've not maybe been or not across the project, we have a very key stakeholder engagement strategy within the project. And with the project, I'll just go to the key ones. We have a project steering committee, which is our overall arching committee, and we have NECA, MEA, we have the government, state and federal, and ETU involved at that level. And we go through the overarching, how the project's running, and so on. We also have an industry benchmark committee, and that's a very important part of the project, where we're setting up the industry benchmarks. And we have ETU, NECA, MEA, and ERAC on that committee. And that committee, I think, has met around probably about 9 times since the project started, and it will continue to do so. And this is going to be one of the really critical phases of the project in the long term. And we also have state EMAP meetings. We meet within, I know in Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales and South Australia. We meet on about a 6-weekly basis with participating RTOs and with the STAs. So that's been a very important part of the project in the last 1.5 years as well. And we also have monthly meetings with the Commonwealth departments to keep them in touch of what's going on within the project. And we meet NECA National once, about every 6 weeks, 4 weeks as well. And we have a lot of internal meetings, and one of the most important meetings we have is the National Validation Committee, which has been used to review the unit assessments as we've built them along the way. So those committees are very, very important, and we will continue those that interface with all those various committees until the end of the project, which runs out at June next year. Probably what I want to do today is to just go through some of the areas that are very important in the project. So the cornerstone of the project, a number of the cornerstones in the project is the mentor advisors role, and you've seen the guys being interviewed there, is a very, very important role within the project. We currently employ 32 mentor advisors, and they're employed across all states and territories within Australia. And their role over the last 2.5 years is to really to engage our stakeholders in the field. So we've been engaging the employers, the potential apprentices, and also the RTOs. And the RTOs have been very, very important in this whole project. And it was probably a bit slow getting off the ground, but we've worked very hard in the field, the MAs and also the mentor supervisors and all the management team engaged in the RTOs over the last 2 odd years. And also the mentor advisor's role is to help roll out the readiness assessment. And I will speak a little bit about the readiness assessment in a minute, but that's been a very, very important role. And we had to do a lot of work in respect to trying to get that accepted on the ground. And that was to set a minimum benchmark going into the EMAP project. The other thing the mentor advisors do is they visit the apprentices and employers at the RTOs and also on the job, and they work very closely with EOs as well. We meet across the country. We meet with the mentor advisors on a regular basis, usually once a week or once every 2 weeks, which is very, very important. The part of the project we felt was very important was to develop the readiness assessment, which was a numeracy and literacy assessment, which we wanted to put every apprentice through that to go into our program. And initially, we had quite a lot of pushback. A lot of people said it was too hard, no one can pass this, and there's all sorts of stories that we were trying to work through. And what we found over the last year, especially, the mentor advisors have worked very, very closely with the RTOs, and this has been really, really important. And we've prepared apprentices or pre-apprentices to undertake the readiness assessment. And we find, we've gone from a situation where we had quite dismal results to the national average over since the start of the project has risen to about 62% pass rate. And if you looked at the last 6 months, from say January this year to July, the pass rate was much higher. It was well into the 70% regions. So, there was one of those things that we wanted to work through, and we felt it's absolutely critical that you have a minimum entry into the apprenticeship. And it's not a new thing. Group training companies have been using it for many, many years. And a lot of countries overseas are using a minimum benchmark to go into the apprenticeship. And it also, through the RA, we can identify candidates where their weaknesses are, and you can actually work and help them. And I think that's been a very, very important aspect of the project so far. So far, we've had around 8,066 candidates undertake the RA across the country, which is a lot, and we have a lot of data. And because if you look back over the last 20 odd years, we never had national data similar to what we've got now with the RA. We knew that some group training companies ran RAs and some people did aptitude tests, but there was not a national model that we could actually dissect and look at the information. And we think that information it will be very important to feed that back to the government at the back end of this project. And it will also be useful for education authorities across the country. I think it will be a good thing. The other thing with the project over the last year is developing the IT platform, and Ben Taylor this morning went through a lot of the things that we've been developing, and I think that's been an enormous job. One of the positives was the iAuditor we developed for organisations that have got field staff. The iAuditor tool is a very useful tool, and we've found that's been very helpful in our project. Building the LMS has been a long journey, and we've learned a lot, I think, along the way. And as each month goes past, we actually are learning more and more as this project continues, which is not an unusual thing. We've developed at this stage all Phase 1 and Phase 2 units, resources and assessments. And one of the very important committees is the National Validation Committee, and all of those units have gone through validation. I think about 3 times we've met, and we continue to tweak the assessments. through that process. We're actually, phase 3 and 4 unit resources have been developed, and we're actually working now on the unit assessments, and hopefully they'll be finished towards the back end of the year. And by the start of next year, we want to have phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 unit resources available for all RTOs that are participating with us going forward into next year, which is very important. We're also developing 25 elective units, which go across a number of different areas, and that work's continuing as we speak, as I'm speaking today. And also the development of the industry benchmarks, that's a very important thing. There's another meeting being held, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. We have ERAC involved with this, which is very important, and we have the industry. So that's going to be a very important thing for us going forward. And I think one of the other things that's been very important in this project is the professional development work that we've undertaken with the RTOs over the last year and a half. That's been an ongoing thing for us, because what happens sometimes we have teachers who leave, teachers get rotated, there's redundancies, and so on and so on. And so we thought we might only have to do it for a short period of time, but we've had to continue to work in that area, and I think that's been very important with the project. One of the other aspects of the project over the next 9 months is the sustainability strategy post the end of the project. So we have to develop a sustainable strategy for the Commonwealth and for the Commonwealth Department that will pull together all the lessons we have learned from this project. And it hasn't all been smooth sailing, and there's been difficulties, and you expect that. This is a major change that we've been trying to work with our participating RTOs and employers and apprentices. And you learn some lessons as you go along the way. Key elements that we are looking at with the sustainability project, our strategy is cost analysis to stakeholders, the state of the industry itself, and during the last 2 years of the project, we've had certain states' economies starting to come off, certain states' economies getting stronger, and that's had an impact on the project when we're trying to recruit apprentices. And maybe just for the other thing I didn't cover was the amount of how many apprentices we've got in the project. We've got 55 in Canberra, which is quite a good number for a small territory like that. New South Wales, 191 apprentices. Queensland, 352. Northern Territory, 45. West Australia, 204. South Australia, 154. Tassie, 82. And Victoria, 436. We got around 1,519, and we had a target of around 1,500 with the Commonwealth Government. So going back to the sustainability strategy, the other thing we have to look at is competency-based progression and wage progression. The wage progression will be handled by the industrial parties, but we will feed in the input we've had from the benchmark assessments and so on, and the industry will, in the end, have to sit down and look at all the data we've collected and what worked and what didn't, and they will then decide where they're going with the wage progression and the introduction of competency-based wage progression. The other thing it's definitely we're looking at is the impact of state and territory funding arrangements, and I think yesterday's discussions, we heard the CEO from Homesclan in Victoria, and it's not unique just to Victoria. There's a lot of other states are getting squeezed financially, and how that will affect any introduction of competency-based training within the industry. And also we're developing priorities between now and the end of the project. There are a number of issues that have been identified over the last couple of years, and ongoing, as I said before, ongoing government changes to vet, policy and funding arrangements, and we felt that's continued to destabilise. You know, a lot of the TAFEs that we're working with, there's a lot of apprehension about, will they have a job next week, you know, and that does affect their interface with us. So we are aware of that around the country. And the other thing is we are concerned about RTO funding cuts, the potential of reduction of face-to-face delivery. That's a real issue for us as well. And we're really concerned that pressure is going to really come on over the next couple of years. And the other thing, quite clearly, a number of RTOs struggle to develop their own resources and assessment tools. Again, it's based on, have you got anybody who can do the work? Have you got enough people on your books, etc.? And we believe that's an ongoing problem within our industry, and it's not a new problem, it's an ongoing problem. And we've had situations where some teachers have struggled with the whole concept of competency-based and change management. I think a lot of the tapes have spoken to us about that. And we are not surprised. And so that whole thing about if this was becoming the norm and we're going to roll this out in this country, there has to be work undertaken with the teachers and within the colleges of how you go about rolling out true competency-based training. And one of the other things that's come up is the lack of integrated theory and practical workshop facilities. And that's a major redesign if you're going to have that sort of thing in your colleges. So they're the sort of things that we've found, and I don't want to sound negative because we have really, I'd like to thank all the RTOs who have really worked hard with us over the last couple of years, and it's been a long and difficult journey, and we're going to continue working closely with everyone right through to the end of the project, and we want this project to continue beyond June next year, and that's going to be very important that it does. And so yeah, the other thing, what we don't know is the ACT contracts are going to be changed, as probably you've read, and there's going to be some new arrangements, so how that's going to impinge on those sorts of things going forward as well, and also the whole question of mentoring. Mentoring has been successful, and it's not a surprise to anyone. Mentoring was always going to work, and I think going forward we would hope there is some form of mentoring in our industry over the next number of years, and I think it's very, very important. And this review of the ACT contract and other arrangements we're going to watch with some interest. So that's roughly in a nutshell. It's been a long journey, and we've had our good times and bad times, but look, major change does never come easy, and we're going to have to continue working very hard over the next 9 months to the end of the project. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, look, just before we get started, I just wanted to mention in regards to energy space, I've had a couple of people come up and ask me. Everything we talked about so far has really been to do with the electrical industry and the electrician's qualification. So people have been asking, are we looking beyond that? And I want to assure you all that we are. The electrical qualification got a bit of a head start through the MAPS program. So that's been our focus, at least initially. It's also got a much higher throughput than most of our other qualifications. But going forward, we see as key to supporting industry, providing those sorts of resources for all our qualifications. So hopefully that puts a few people's minds at ease. Also, I'd like to say it's fantastic standing up here and seeing so many of you still here. I've been to a couple of conferences recently, which by the end of the second day, the room is looking a lot more empty. I think that's a great testament to the passion you all have for the industry. And so in my section now, I'd like to harness a little bit of that passion and ask you all to fill in the surveys you would have received about the environmental scan for 2015. The environmental scan is a very important piece of work we do, which really looks at getting grassroots intelligence about what's happening. So we have a lot of, the National Centre of Vocational Education Research, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, do a lot of great work capturing what's already happened. The environmental scan tries to do something a little bit different, which is tries to predict, but not just predict on the basis of ongoing trends. So we really like to capture everything you guys tell us, whether it's through the TAC forums, whether it's through the surveys, whether it's through anecdotal conversations about what you guys are experiencing, and put that in a package that's easy for government to access and is easier for media to access. It forms really good background and also good information for people within training institutions who perhaps don't have that energy sector background and those connections themselves. So it's a very important piece of work. There's a big benefit to all of you to participating, and I would really ask you to engage with that if you could. While you're all busy filling in those forms, I'll just quickly go through a little bit about the 2014 environmental scan. It's available on our website. We do have a hard copy available as well. It's a fantastic read, riveting page-turnery kind of stuff, so make sure you jump on. While you're doing all that, I'll just go through a couple of the highlights from that environmental scan. Look, the biggest thing going on in the energy sector at the moment, shocking for everyone, I think, particularly in its scale, has been the fall in energy demand over the last 4 years. So for about 130, 140 years, about as long as records have been kept, although it's a little bit hard to judge, energy demand has increased year on year, particularly in terms of electricity. So that was through 2 world wars, that was through depression, numerous recessions, electricity demand grew constantly. And it was really closely tied to domestic product growth. what we've seen that's really interesting in the last 4 years is domestic product has continued to grow at about trend, but electricity demand has fallen. And nobody really saw this happening, and particularly to the extent it has. So in 2010, the energy market operators were predicting that we would have 2.1% growth, just above 2% growth for the next decade. Instead, we've seen a fall of 1.5% each year since. So, I mean, when you aggregate that, you're looking at 16% less electricity being used on the national electricity market than we thought was going to happen just 4 years ago. That's 1 in 6 of our, the power plants that we thought we were going to need, we don't need at all. I think that's 30 terawatt hours of reduced demand from the predictions of just 4 years ago. Now that makes it a really interesting investment situation. There's a lot of uncertainty going forward, and in the eScan we've really tried to pick together some of the reasons why energy demand has fallen, whether these factors will continue, if we are looking to improve the energy efficiency of the country, as has obviously happened because energy demand has fallen and GDP growth has continued, how we would do that and how skills would support that. Again, this is part of that riveting read stuff I was telling you all about, so I know that you're all jumping on devices to download a copy. The 4 reasons we identify, the first of all and the largest factor is energy efficiency. So 2010, when we really saw this kicking in, not at all surprising that it was also the introduction of energy efficiency standards for buildings right across the country. And look, that's had an astounding effect. One of the things we were looking at in the government's energy white paper is that a house built today takes 30%, almost a third less energy to heat and cool than a house built just a decade ago. I mean, that's 2004, that's, you know what I mean, that's not the dark ages. There's a huge amount of change in a very short period of time. The second major effect in energy efficiency has been lighting. Those energy efficiency standards are for all new buildings or large-scale renovations, and so they'll continue to flow through the market. So we think this is going to be a continued factor. We also think it's going to be supported by the embedding of energy efficiency units into all qualifications. So that, again, is something that's happening for all new apprentices, all new trainees, and we really think that there's space there for the government to look at upskilling people who've been in the industry for a while in the latest energy efficiency techniques. The next one is the consumer response to rising prices. So we've been talking about electricity demand rising for the last 100 years. The price of electricity, while demand had been rising, the price had actually been falling in real terms. That's been turned around again in the last 5 years to a point where real prices were increasing by on average about 10% per year in real terms. That's a huge effect. People had before that had predicted that energy prices were incredibly elastic. Demand wouldn't change no matter what happened to the price. That has obviously been proven false. And the people that has had most effect on are households. Household energy consumption has fallen by 13% in the last period. So across the nation, energy demand has fallen by 6%. Households have been at more than twice that rate. Business demand has been about flat, which is still impressive when GDP growth is continuing. But consumers are interested in electricity in a way they never have been before. They're more aware of these issues. They're looking for ways to save energy, and that really provides a lot of opportunities for all of us. Building, designing systems which can measure and can audit is a big area of growth in the future. And we've seen that through the National Workforce Development Fund. Bob mentioned a moment ago that photovoltaics were the largest area of take-up within our qualifications. The next highest was instrumentation. Energy auditing is one that we figure also by itself would require about a 10% increase in the number of electricians to audit every premise over the next decade. So that was actually back in our 2012 eScan, which was also a very good read. Distributed generation, all the photovoltaic systems we've heard about, has had an effect. It's probably not as big as most people think. It's still producing somewhere in the sort of 3-4% of the total electricity being drawn on the system, but obviously that's not going to be on the national electricity market. So a lot of that's being used, at a household level before it comes onto the market. So we're not really quantifying all of that. And so a grain of salt, we think, maybe 10% of that reduction has been to do with distributed generation systems. That proportion will increase in the future. And the final one, which is about 5% of the effect, so quite a small proportion, has been structural shift in the economy. And so that's really the closing of big aluminium smelters and the like. And that has had a noticeable effect, but again, it's not one of the major factors and probably doesn't have very big skill implications for us in the future. Of course, in the manufacturing industry, that will be much larger. I'd like to take a moment now. Look, I put these slides together before I realised quite how much discussion we're going to have about distributed generation at the forum. So I really won't hark too much onto the detail, other than to say electric cars are going to be a big part of this change. One thing we've been looking at with rising electricity prices is that even though consumption has been falling, prices per unit have been going up quite dramatically. And one of the big reasons for that is we have to build our electricity networks to deal with peak demand. Peak demand has not been falling at anywhere near the level of aggregate demand. So if all your investment's going in to pay for a peak, which hasn't changed, but suddenly your units are going down, the only way you can make that equation balance is by increasing your per unit charging. And that's what Dr. Karen Hussey today was talking about. One of the ways we could address this is to increase the fixed price cost of electricity. So that's having a connection to your house. Unfortunately, that's not very palatable. Another solution is to increase load at non-peak times to help split the cost of that peak network investment over a larger number of hours. Now, the Energy Supply Association of Australia put out a paper recently saying that 500,000 electric vehicles could be added to the network without increasing the amount of poles and wires that would be required, because they would be drawing at non-peak times. So that means pretty much you are charging at night, you're able to reduce per hour costs because you're using your resources much more efficiently, and you're providing a great network asset. Distributed generation battery storage is very, very valuable. And if there is a mechanism in place that allows the electricity networks and distributors to be able to use your assets, your batteries in your electric cars as part of the network, that could increase network stability, reduce costs, and we just have to find a way of making sure that the owners of the electric vehicles are being paid for the support they're providing to the system. So if you can provide a mechanism where they're being paid for the help they're providing, you make electric cars more affordable and you can really help fuel that whole transition. So that's going to be a really, really interesting space, and the take-up of electric vehicles is something which potentially has huge implications for our trades. The other thing, and a related note, is the Internet of Things, which has really become quite a sort of sexy buzzword. You can't pick up a newspaper these days without reading something about it. And this is really to do with the interconnectivity of devices. So rather than people talking to people across the internet, you're really having your air conditioner talk to your pool pump, both of them talking to your electrical distributor, who's saying, look, you know, you're reaching the limit that our poles and wires can deal with. There will be some sort of financial benefit for, you know, reducing consumption. Your pool pump will stop and it'll wait until a time when it can go at lower demand, all that sort of stuff. We've also heard a bit of talk in the last couple of days about how difficult this would be for people to manage. So what we think is that in the end, people won't. This will be stuff that you contract out to have some sort of specialist firm. You have your electric car, you know that you're going to be taking a trip of 100 Ks. You might say, make sure my electric car has at least 150 Ks of range by tomorrow morning so I know I can make the trip I need to make. But if price goes above a certain point, feel free to sell some of the extra electricity in that battery beyond that to help subsidise the cost of the car. You're going to be having devices around the house meshing together to operate the system as effectively as possible. And then again, that has really big benefits for consumers in terms of what network augmentation is required. So at the end of the day, it's really interesting looking at the numbers. I'm not sure whether everyone else is as excited about the numbers as I am. But we actually have a situation where electricity demand is falling, but the number of workers required to meet the needs of the industry are increasing. So we're having demand fall, but we're having consumers want more integrated systems, more instrumentation, sort of smarter poles and wires and systems that can speak to each other. So that's a really, really valuable and interesting situation for us, where we have falling electricity demand, but increasing demand for energy sector skills. The sad point on this that I just wanted to add to is that we're really not keeping up with that, with our skills development. So this is a graph. The yellow is from the National Centre for Vocational Education Research. It's got to do with the number of apprentices coming in the energy sector trades. The big dip you can see is 2009 with the global financial crisis. The lines we've put in green are how many completions there have been, and they're really tied back. You can see, although some apprentices take more or less time, a fairly strong indicator of how many apprentices are going to complete in 1 year is based on how many started 4 years beforehand. Not just electrical apprentices right across the energy sector trades. And what you can see from that is there's no real growth. There are some effects of the economic cycle, but we know that these are macro trends. These aren't dependent on the economic cycle. There is going to be need for more energy sector workers, and at the moment, the pipeline isn't increasing. People aren't coming through any faster. So I think that's a challenge for all of us. We can improve this by getting more people into the industry, and we can improve this by improving completion rates, improving how effectively we're training people. So thank you very much to everyone for filling in those surveys. We really, really appreciate it. There will be other opportunities for you to comment on our environmental scan. We'll be sending out some other stuff. Pretty much if you have any information that you think is valuable, anything you've been hearing, either from your own experience or from your stakeholders, please jump on the email or give me a call. Now, thank you very much.